Hello everyone. So in this tutorial we will see how you can use the keyboard events to detect different key presses, and this is the exact same way that the closing event happens. So the way that we can actually press the button here to close the window, this is detected by an event. So the same way that this is detected, we are going to detect different other key presses to use in our game. So every time a different event happens, just like the Pygame.quit or different button or key press events, that starts to fill up the event queue. And if you don't address this particular event, so if you don't call pygame.event.get, the actual queue will start to fill up and eventually it will slow our game down. So it's easier and nicer to actually clean your event queue, and I'm gonna show you how you can address the different events to detect key presses. So let's go ahead and declare actually two values here. So x will be display width divided by 2, and y is going to be display height divided by 2. And you can also do like -30. Okay, so now inside of our game loop and inside of the for loop that addresses the events, we are going to use another if statement here. So we're going to say if event.type equals pygame.keyDown. What you can do now is, because this detects a key press in general, you can actually take subcategories of these keys. So you could say if event.key equals pygame.kUp, and this is sort of the event for pressing the up arrow key on your keyboard. So if the event type is a key press down and the event key is actually the up arrow, you could say that the y could be -3. Remember, we are counting from top to bottom, so minus means that we're actually going up on the y value. So you could also say if event dot key equals pygame.kDown. So this means that we're pressing the down arrow key, y plus equals 3. And then again, if event.key equals pygame.kRight. So what you want to do now is x plus equals 3. And finally, and you could use else if statements here instead of if statements if you'd like. But it's up to you. You could use any of those. Equals pygame.k left. And what you want to do here is x minus equals 3. Great. So what you want to do now is, let's draw a rectangle. So pygame.draw rect, and we want to draw in our game surface, and we want to draw with the color green. And let's start from x and y and make this a 60 by 60 rectangle. So what this is going to do is it's going to make a rectangle at these coordinates here, at display width divided by 2 -30, comma display width display height divided by 2 -30. It's going to make this rectangle, and each time we press a different key, it's going to make the rectangle move around our screen. So let's go ahead and try this. And I'm just going to be pressing different keys now. So this just makes it move really slow. And you could actually increase or decrease the values here to make it move faster or slower. And I'm actually able to move this around. Now, you can't actually see it, but if I hold down a particular key, you can see that this doesn't move. It stops moving if I hold down a key. So let's make this another way that we can actually sort this issue out, and we can make it so that it moves when we hold down a key. So let's go ahead and make two more variables here called xChange, which will be 0, and yChange, which will also be 0. Now inside of our loops here, instead of moving the different coordinates around, we could do yChange equals -3, or yChange equals 3, and here we can change this to xChange equals 3 and xChange equals -3. Perfect. So next we need to make the key, we need to use the key up. So this is for pressing a key down. Now we have to use the if event.type, just like we did here, equals pygame.keyUp. So this here is true when we press down a key, and this is true when we release the key. So actually we need another equal sign here. And now in here what we can do is we can use the exact same if statements as here, only now we have to change all of these to 0. So now instead of making this move by that, we can make this x plus equals x change and y plus equals y change. So what this does is when we press a key down, it sets x change or y change to one of these values, and when we actually release the key, it resets all of these, so we don't actually move anymore. So this is a more consistent way to make this move while you hold down. So now I'm holding down the right arrow key, now I'm holding down the down arrow key, so we can see that we can make it move much more smoothly now, and you can actually move it diagonally as well. So what you can do as an exercise, you can change the keys of movement, so make the square move using the following keys instead of the arrows: I for up, K for down, L for right, and J for left. You can Google what the event code is here, so pygame.what, that's what you need to know, and you can make this work just by changing that. So now let's go ahead and create a jumping sort of effect that what happens is our square moves up when we press the space key, and it stops moving up and starts falling when we release the space key. So let's go ahead and set x to 0 and y to 420. Now let's leave x change and y change to 0. And now let's go inside of our event loop. Inside here, we want to do if the event.type equals pygame.keyDown. Now what we want to do in this situation is we can y change this to -3. And remember, this means that we sort of moving upwards, not downwards. And now if event.type, oh, we actually need to include one more, so if event.key, this should be equal to pygame.k_space. So if we press the space key upwards, so if we press the space key down, this will move upwards. So if event type equals pygame.keyUp, and if event.key equals pygame.k_space, and you could always do something like end that, but this is actually more clean if you do it this way for our purposes right now. So now you just say y change equals to 3. Perfect. So you can always change the values. I find that 3 now is a good number to use. Now what you can do here is you can say if y is greater or equal to 420, do y minus equals 3. So this just resets it if the y is greater or equal to 420. And what we can also do here is we can say x plus equals x change and y plus equals y change. And then we fill the game surface with black, and then we draw our regular rectangle. So let's go ahead and see what happens if I press. So if I hold down the space key, this looks like it's jumping. If I leave space key alone, it will start falling down. So this creates like a jumping effect. So it moves up when I press it, and when I release it, it starts falling down. So enough about keyboard key presses. Now let's talk about the mouse button press. So now let's detect 3 different events for the mouse. So the mouse has 3 different events: mouse button down, mouse button up, and mouse motion. So the mouse button down detects when a mouse button is pressed down. The mouse button up detects when the mouse button is released. So one of these events is triggered. Then we need to find which button is pressed. So we do this with the event.button attribute. So let's go ahead and see an example of that. In here, let's go in our event loop here. So if event.type equals Pygame.MOUSEBUTTONDOWN. So remember, this is for when we press the mouse down, and we can just print mouse button pressed at, and then we can do event.pos and event.button. So what this does is it's going to print our position of the mouse and the button that we actually pressed down. So then we can do if event.type equals Pygame.MouseButtonUp. So we can now print mouse button released at, and now we can do event.pos and event.button. And now finally, if event.type equals Pygame.MouseMotion, now we can just say print mouse button moved at, and then we can do event.pos and event.button. So if we go ahead now and run this, oh, and actually we need to use buttons here. So now if I don't do anything here, it will just print the coordinates. As you can see on our console output, you can see it prints the coordinates of my mouse and 0, 0, 0. That means that I'm pressing neither key. So if I click my left click, now it says 1. So that means I pressed my left click. If I press my right click, now it says 3. And if I press my middle click, that says 2. So these are for the clicks of the mouse. And if you have more side buttons in your mouse, you can try to press them and see what values they print. So for example, I have 2 on the left of my mouse, and one says 7, the other one says 6, I think. Yeah. So you can try that and see what values your mouse prints. But 1, 2, and 3 are generally for the left click, the middle click, and the right click. So now let's actually modify our code to detect which key we pressed. So let's start by doing, inside of our events here, let's delete all of this code. and we could say just if event.button equals to 1, that means it's our left click. So let's print left click down, and now let's just copy this. Actually, let's copy the whole loop here, and now let's do else if, and instead of 1 now let's actually use number 2. So if we press the middle click, you could say here middle click down, and let's repeat this one more time with the right click. So right click down, and you can copy this whole loop here and do this for the mouse button up, and just change down to up. So now we know when we press what button and how has that happened. So is it a press down, is it a release, and you can actually delete the mouse motion. So if we run this, you can now see if I click my left click, it's going to say left click down. When I release it, it says left click up, and that works for all 3 of my buttons for my mouse. And just remember, if you have a mouse with more buttons, you can actually just add a printing statement, just like we did before, to detect what number your key is, and you can actually use this key as well if you want to program it to do something else. So now let's do another example. Let's create a square, and we can have it change the color when we point our mouse over it. So let's go ahead and delete our events here to make it more clean. Okay, so now let's start by creating an X value here. Let's make this 0. Let's also make a Y value 0. Let's make a width and a height. So inside of our for loop of events, we can add here if the event.type equals Pygame.MOUSEBUTTONDOWN, or actually let's start with MOUSEMOTION. So let's actually get the tuple of the position. So mx, my equals event.pos, and if you don't remember, this is actually going to save the x value and the y value of the position inside of these two variables. So after that, we can just say if x is less than mx, and then that is less than x plus w, and also y is less than my, which is less than y plus h, and this will make sense in a little bit. So color is blue now, else our color is red. So what we need to do here inside of our game section, we can do pygame.draw.rectangle, and we can make this a game surface. We can make this the color that we set, and this will be x, y, w, and h. So I think this is correct. So if we go ahead and run this, you can see that when I hover over the square, it actually changes to blue, and when my cursor is removed, it actually changes back to red. So now let me actually explain this here if statement. Why is it so? You may be confused right now. So let's see. Okay, so now let's see. The top left corner of the square has a value of x. So the other corner here, the corner on the right, has a value of x plus w. Remember, w is the width. So this here is x plus w. So whatever is in here for the x-axis is between x and x plus w. This is why for our if statement here we have that the mx, which is the mouse x value, this has to be between x and x plus w to work. So if this is within the boundaries of x, and also the same works for y, so this here is y and this here is y plus h, and what we want is the mouse y to be inside of y and y plus h. So if both of these are true for the both axes, that means that our mouse pointer is within the square, and so we know that we need to change the color to blue. Hopefully this makes sense. If it doesn't, just keep in mind that this loop here, this if statement here, checks if our mouse pointer is within the boundaries of the square. And now, just for fun, let's also add a detection for the left click of the mouse button. So let's go ahead and add here another event. So if event.type equals Pygame.MOUSEBUTTONDOWN. Now if the event.button equals to 1, so if this is a left click, mx, my will be equal to event.pos. Now if x is less than mx less than x plus w, and y is less than my less than y plus h, so the exact same thing that we did above for the hovering over, we can just print you clicked me. Okay, so if we go ahead and run this, you can see that when we click the square, a message here is displayed in our console which says you clicked me. So each time I click it, it lets us know here. So this here just works the same way as the above if statement. It just checks for a particular key here. So as an exercise, what you have to do is make the square move with the left mouse click. The square should move to the position where the mouse was clicked. So just make it move towards the point it was clicked. Practice with that, and as you can see, this event loop is getting more complicated. Generally, the game loop is getting more complicated. So make sure you are clear with what happens in which section of the game loop. So remember, here we have the event handler, then we make whatever changes we need, and then we update it. Keep this in mind so you don't get confused as the loops get more and more complicated in the future.